Okay, so I have a base here where I've got about 3 coils that I've already blended and attached, and I'm going to continue to build. My previous videos showed exposed coil where it wasn't blended out on the outside, it was only blended on the inside, so I wanted to make sure I included that, and also following a slightly different form as I go up. Okay, so these have been blended as I said, and this piece was actually made a few days ago. It's been wrapped in plastic. But this clay is firmer than the clay I'm about to add, so I also want to point that out as I start in my first coils up. I've pre-made a whole bunch of coils. I don't recommend doing that for my own students. If you don't have the time to roll coils and assemble the same day, it's better to make 3 or 4 coils at a time and then build, pause, make coils, and kind of go back and forth. That is beneficial both for using your class time well as the reality that if you get a really tall piece by using soft clay, it's going to be really flexible and a little too soft for most beginners to feel comfortable as it gets taller. So it's kind of nice to build a section, let it kind of firm up while you're creating coils or from one day to the next. Also, I would normally have a piece of plastic underneath my piece so that the base is not drying out on the wood that it's sitting on. In the case of this, just for demonstration purposes, I generally pull the plastic out because it makes a little bit of noise. I might actually leave this here though, because you can kind of see the contrast of the shape better than you can on the wood. So we'll see if I last or if I end up pulling it out of the way. So in any case, I have scored. Now I'm going to add some water, just dabbing along that edge to soften that clay up, and then I score again. I like to push the tool through or make scoring marks in different directions each time I do that. Makes the slip a little bit better, makes sure I'm really digging in and making a nice mess on the surface so that my scoring and slipping really is a good way to attach pieces. And then I'm going to start in here, set my next coil on top. This coil looks just long enough to kind of overlap barely. Before I really attach it, I'm going to do my check-in with my template, and it looks like I set it a little bit wide. So this particular shape, our A-shape template in the classroom, goes up and gets wider as it goes up, but very, very gradually. So it's almost like you're setting the coils one on top of the other directly. You are just slightly setting it to the outside. So it's very, very gradual. And then where my overlap is, I'm going to cut through at an angle and then remove those little teeny pieces, blend that across. Press this down so it's nice and firm and secure to the base. And then I'm not going to blend it yet. Whoops. Not going to blend it yet because I don't want to spend my time blending each coil individually. Instead, I'm going to go right to my next coil. Again with the scoring, water, create slip. Okay, and I'm making that slip again by mixing my clay with that water. And then grab my next coil. This guy's looking still a little bit thick. Just give it a little extra. Attach him on, or set him on really. And then it's not quite long enough, so I'm going to grab the end of another coil and bridge that, just like that. There's a gap there, but there won't be for long. Again, check with my template first. I did the same thing again. I kind of put the coil on a little too wide in some areas. Other areas, I did it right. Even where this little bridge is, I will still want that to line up nicely. And then one little thing when I'm cutting, since I'm cutting 2 ends, I'm going to cut and cut. What I'm seeing some students do, and I may have even done myself, well, I definitely have done it myself before, is I'll cut and then attach and then go over here and cut, but then my piece is sitting kind of sideways. It just doesn't fit quite as well. So it's better if you make both cuts at the same time and then remove those ends and do your blend. Okay, and then again, firm that up onto that base, just pressing it gently but firmly down. And then I'm going for my third coil. Again, 3 coils is an average, okay? If you only get 2 on and you feel the need to blend them in, you can. I just don't recommend doing 1 at a time. Again, you'll lose a lot of time just by moving slower, blending each one separately. You also, if you're working with soft clay, can distort the edge a little bit more because you're pressing, just making more contact with things. Find one that's a little bit longer, see if it works. And so you can end up kind of giving yourself more work with trying to keep the form uniform by blending each one. And again, I'm just a little short with a lot of these coils. It's just going to be the way it is. So I set it in place and I check it with my template. This one I did a little bit better. I'm going to set it down in the right place now that I've done it a couple times. And then again, I'm going to show you on this side. Cut through both ends at the same time. Remove those top pieces, remove those bottom ends, fit that piece right in, blend them across. Nice soft clay there where it's just been cut. And now I've got 3 coils up, so I'm going to do my blending now. So press that guy in so it's nice and firm and attached. Now I'm going to have my hand on the outside for support, and so you can see this using my fingertip, blend down on the inside. I tend to do it at a slight diagonal, and because my clay's a little soft and I've just been scoring and slipping and moving kind of quickly, my clay's a little on the slippery side. So if I'm struggling to really capture much clay there, I can switch to using the round corner of my rib and use that instead of the tip of my finger. If you have long fingernails, this definitely works better. Or my go-to tool generally is my wooden knife, that rounded end. And again, just kind of blending down. If you've got smaller hands, you might be able to go straight down, but for me, on a diagonal works better. I'm just blending to attach. I'm not making anything perfect right now. On the outside, I'm going to do the same thing, blending up. Now, as I said earlier, this clay is firmer than the 3 coils I just added. So if I was struggling to blend up and capture a little bit of this clay and bring it up, a lot of times it's kind of stiff or hard. The cheat is to use your toothpick tool, your blending tool, and go over that surface. Kind of soften that edge a little bit with the scoring tool. And that just opens the clay up, softens it, and now I can move it even easier. My clay is pretty soft though, so I'm probably just gonna, I don't know. Up here it's definitely soft, but I'm getting a little seam that just kind of wants to stay there between the old clay and the new clay. So I can make my life easier, move a little faster with this part of the process by just going around, because I'm going to smooth all this out so I can make it look kind of funky and rough right now, and then go over it with my finger here. And if I've got more material at top than I do at the bottom, it's okay to go the other direction a little bit. The point of blending up on the outside and blending down on the inside is really to keep, if you're blending down on both sides, a lot of people will end up pushing a lot of clay down and ending up with these thicker based pieces. So that is a part of the reason for going 2 different directions, one on the inside, one on the outside. It just keeps the walls a little more even. But when you have a spot where you have more clay here and you want to kind of spread up and down, go for it. Just really paying attention how thick the wall is. If you're someone that you know that you've kind of struggled with controlling how thick the walls of your pieces are, you just don't really feel it as much as you think you should, then just following those directions of going up on the outside and down on the inside will help to keep you pretty steady. Okay, so this is fairly rough, but it is totally blended, which is my goal at the moment. So I'm going to keep on building. It's leaving a lot of texture on the surface, which is, again, okay. This is roughing it out, okay? Just trying to get the form, not make it perfect yet. I've gotten a little clay who's kind of wiped off, not a whole lot, which is fine. And then on the inside, I'm gonna do the same thing using that straight edge, hand on the outside for support. In this case, because of just, you know, size and space, it's easier for me to just go horizontal than diagonal. But if you can reach in there and kind of pull it up diagonally, you can. And again, I'm really trying to just get those high points to knock down. And I do not want to stretch this clay a whole lot. I'm going to see whether I ended up sort of stretching it by pushing hard. But but I'm really using this hand and forcing this wall in a little bit while I smooth over it so that I'm not accidentally stretching this wall out. Kind of got the basics. I'm going to go down to the bottom a little bit, turn my tool over because I don't want that sharp point to be digging in the bottom corner. Okay, so on the inside again, not perfect, and here I can see little dents and dips and things like that. If it bothers me, I can take some of this soft clay that I have that kind of just scraped off in my rib, and if I move quickly while this clay is nice and soft, this clay is the same moisture level as what I was just scraping, obviously, because that's where it came from. So I can get that clay right back in there, especially since it's so soft, and kind of backfill and get away with doing that without having to score and slip, because not only is it a small amount of clay, although that's really not so much a factor of deciding whether you're scoring and slipping or not, it's really because the water level in the clay is the same. So as we would say, that the temperature of the clay is the same, which if you haven't noticed already, your clay, when it's really soft and full of water, it is colder than it will be as your clay body begins to dry when you're building your pieces. So I've smoothed what I need to smooth to continue to build. Now I'm going to look at my template and I can see, just because of smoothing, I've kind of got a gentle curve that's starting to happen in the wall of my piece. And that's just because of the pressure that I was pushing, and possibly as I was dragging the coil or the rib up the side, I was probably pushing in a little bit here. So I've got this real gentle curve that's happened. If I don't want that curve there, if that bothers me, and I really want something very angular here, then a simple technique is to compress these walls using friction and using the surface of your hands. So I put my hands around my piece, and just like you can see on the camera here, it's on the opposite side than I am standing. My fingertips are about 1.5 inches or so apart. Can be 1 inch, can be up to 2 inches, but not like this. I don't want them way far apart. I want them kind of, I don't know, about 1 inch, 1.5 inches apart. And I'm gonna slide my hand along the wall. I'm not sliding it on the surface just, without any pressure. I'm holding the side of the wall with just enough pressure, and because my clay's soft, sort of like my hands are stuck to the walls a bit, and I slide my fingertips together. And then I walk over about 1 inch or 2 and slide my fingertips together, walk over. Notice also that my middle fingers, my 3 middle fingers, are right where my vase started to get a little bit wide and kind of bulge out lightly. So I'm focusing all my energy into this zone of my hand. Well, my whole hand's resting on the side, but I'm really using just these 3 fingers. And if you can see, my hands look really wet right there because that's where I'm making contact. And what I'm doing, if you can see it this way, let's see if the camera picks it up a little bit, is I'm sliding my fingers together. And when I do that, I'm compressing this wall this direction. So it's coming together. I am not flexing the wall and squeezing it this way. Instead, I'm sliding my fingers along, and it compresses the clay back together. It's a great way to kind of bring the diameter in, make it smaller when you just see it starting to happen. This is the best kind of simple method to be able to get back on this template. Now you can see I squeezed it just enough that it's even a little indented here. Not too much, but whereas before I had a little bulge, now just by doing that simple process of sort of sliding across and compressing the walls, it's come in quite a bit. And if I go around, it's kind of done that everywhere. I'm gonna leave it that way because I know when I go to add my next section, it might bulge a little bit and I may end up having to do a fix again. Okay? So I'm gonna go right back to adding some more coils. Okay, so everything's blended on and attached. Now I'm gonna do that smoothing like I did before, using the straight edge in this case. Going up at a slight diagonal. Again, I don't wanna go straight up because if I have any bounce or any dips in there because of the coils, it's just gonna get worse. So either going at a diagonal or going horizontally. Again, it's not about really removing clay. This is smoothing, trying to find all those little lumps and bumps. My hand on the inside, giving me something to push against so that I don't accidentally really push the side of my piece in too much. And again, I'm moving pretty fast here so that I can demonstrate all of this, quite frankly. And if I was making this just my own piece, I would be moving slower. So don't feel that you need to rush because you see how quickly I'm moving here. I just want to show you the techniques so you have them and kind of why and what each one does. Now my tool is getting pretty muddy, kind of sticking to the piece a bit. So it's also going to leave some debris on the surface here more because of that. So if I don't want all that debris getting on there, I would be cleaning my tool off periodically, getting all the gloopy clay off. I've got my big sponge in the bucket here. It's a good place to wipe that edge clean. And then when I come back on my piece, I would be much smoother. Still pulling up a little bit of rough stuff, but not nearly as much because I'm cleaning my tool. Okay, so checking that, and then I'm going to go to the inside, do the same thing this time. Just because of reaching into the inside, I tend to go much more horizontal in my motion instead of diagonal. But however you are comfortable kind of moving through your piece, if you want to pull up, kind of a swirling motion. And I'm getting some debris coming off of this, especially because I am moving a little more horizontally, so it's kind of really scraping the clay off the high points. So I'm going to smear it right back into the lower points. when we go to glaze these, we are high firing. So some of the high fire glazes will be a little forgiving, and they are a little thicker and will fill in some of the imperfection on the inside of your piece. This particular vase shape is our most open vase shape. So because it opens up and it's bigger on the top, it's really easy to look down on into the inside. Some of the other shapes sort of round or come in at a neck and then open up again. So it's a little harder to get a full visual on the inside. So quite honestly, this is the shape where you're probably going to want to do the most smoothing on the interior because it will show. Whereas on the other ones, again, it'll be just a little bit more forgiving. Okay, so I've got my basic blending smoothing done. And now I actually want to get the top even because as you can see, it's a bit wonky. It goes up and down a little bit. So the way to fix that, try to get my vase sort of in the middle of my board, is to find your lowest point. And you can use your ruler and kind of scan, just bring that around. And I think that's about my lowest point, which is at about 10.5 inches. But I think I'm just gonna even the whole thing out to an even 10. So I could either decide I'm gonna go with my lowest point since it's above my minimum for this project requirement and just do the whole thing at 10.5, that would be fine. I'm gonna do it to 10 so you could just kind of can see the process a little bit better, better visual. I'm gonna take my plastic out of the way as well because it kind of drags around and gets in the way of my ruler. And one tool I of course forgot to grab is my fettling knife, which is the one I need. So, got my fettling knife here. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is a little awkward, honestly, but it is the best method. And that is, well, it's one of the best methods I think I've found, is if I'm gonna go to 10 inches, I'm gonna hold my needle tool absolutely perpendicular. So it's horizontal to the vertical of the ruler. And I put my needle tool right at that 10, and I pinch those together. I'm gonna hold them together and really be mindful that my needle tool stays flat. And I'm gonna put my ruler down on the board, and I'm gonna poke just a little hole just to make a mark. I'll go this direction so you might be able to see them maybe on camera. And I just set my tool down and give it a little poke. Now you do have to be careful of a couple things. One is that you're actually setting the ruler down and you're not setting it on its tip, because if I do that, I'm gonna put a mark much lower than I would otherwise. So trying to keep everything fairly flat and even. And I'm not doing a big motion. I'm not holding my tool way over here and leaning in, because that again will change the angle and where I'm making my mark. So I keep my tool relatively close to my vase, and I make a little mark every inch, inch and a half, not very far apart. And when I get to the spot where I've already marked, I like to go around a couple and make sure that I am still steady. Because if you come around and you find out you're about a ½ inch off, then you're probably tipping your tool or tipping your needle tool and not holding it even. The other way to do that without having to balance the two is to hold your ruler up and just make a little mark and move it, and make a little mark and move it, and make a little mark, and hold the ruler more flat against the side and just poke each time. That's totally fine. I just find I save a little time if I hold them together and poke as I go, okay? You could use a pencil, you could use your wooden knife, you could use anything that has a point on it to be making that mark. It does not have to be your needle tool either. But now I've gone around and I've got all these little dots. And now I'm gonna use my kindergarten skills of dot to dot making, and I'm gonna use my fettling knife. And so you can see it on your guys' side. I'm gonna push my fettling knife right through on one of my dots, holding the tool so it's horizontal and flat. And I push all the way through until I'm at the widest point of the blade. So wide that it will hold itself right there, okay? I do that because that gives me less work, and I can keep that blade flat as I continue to pull through. Whereas if I was only using the tip of the knife, I would have to do so much more work, and there's a chance that I would end up with this sort of wave thing happening on the surface because I'm only using the thin part of the knife. So I push that knife all the way to the widest point, and now I'm just gonna do exactly what I said, a dot to dot. So I'm pulling this knife, and again, my clay is super soft because I just built this. Pulling that through, dot to dot to dot. Not trying to do it in one motion. Again, especially as beginners, that tends to give you kind of a roller coaster ride as a rim. Just pulling that all the way around until I get back to my start. And I'm going to take all that off. Okay. Clean that blade. Now where my original spot is, I kind of have a little dip, which I don't like. Probably happened because when I pushed the tool in, the clay sort of pushed in and then took a little with it. So I've got this little dip I don't like at all. So I'm going to use the back of the blade because it's nice and flat, and then I'm going to find one side that matches and rock it across. So I just see where I've kind of got these two little bloops that have happened, and I'm going to carefully just shave those away. Try to get rid of that little dip that sort of happened. But you do have to be careful of overcorrecting, because if you keep trying to just shave off a little here and a little there, you end up starting to, again, get a little bit of a roller coaster ride. So my rim might not look totally flat and even on camera. Some of that is also just because I haven't done my total smoothing job, and I could have waited and done that then, but I did want to see you to see kind of the process of how to smooth and even the rim. And then these edges are square right now and kind of hard because I just used a knife and cut through them. So a little water on my fingertips. I'm going to go around and just soften those edges. And if any little bits of clay kind of stuck up or got trapped on the fettling knife blade, I can smooth those out here and fix that. What I don't want to do is grab my sponge and start wiping this edge. The sponge will take away material and you will end up with a rough edge instead of a smooth edge. And again, sometimes we overuse it. It feels so nice just pulling and smoothing and smoothing and smoothing. Very often you'll end up developing a dip and you can't feel it, and you might not notice it until later because it's underneath your sponge. So my fingers are always my first go-to. And then I'm going to spend a little time with my metal rib. I'm going to clean this edge off, make sure there's no hard clay or lumps of clay stuck to it. And I'm going to flex it a little bit. And this is the tool where you can make everything absolutely smooth. Now, if I was adding a lot of texture to my piece, I wouldn't bother with this, quite honestly, because all I'm going to be doing is adding even rougher texture to it, either adding clay coils or pieces on here. If I was sprigging the whole surface and adding texture to it as well, then there is no point for me to spend the next 15 minutes making this absolutely smooth, because I'm just going to be adding things and roughing it up again. This part of smoothing is only really important for those of you who are incising or carving into the walls of your piece, because this gives you kind of a blank page so that when you're carving, everything's going to show up really nicely and you won't see any little dents or dings in the side that would distract from your carving. Or if I was sprigging pieces on, which is what I'm going to demo here next, sprigging pieces on and I just want a very smooth surface in the background, then that would be a good thing to do, is to smooth everything. And if you're stamping, stamps also tend to look much nicer if you do that into a smooth surface. But if you're doing an additive method or you plan on texturing a lot, even beneath sprigs, then this is really an unnecessary step. So don't waste time smoothing if you don't need it. method.